Waking up before the sun even thought about rising was already a habit. My alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., but most days I was awake before it rang. The silence of dawn had something sacred about it. It reminded me why I did all this. My wife asleep, my kids safe, the smell of coffee I brewed myself, my uniform waited on the chair, folded and clean. A small ritual that gave me dignity. I didn't have luxury, but I had pride. No passenger could ever say I was late or rude. Driving wasn't just a job. It was how I kept what I loved alive. And in those early hours, alone on the cold streets, I felt like the world, for a brief moment, depended on me. My route never changed. Same gas station, same newspaper guy, same dog that followed me for 2 blocks before giving up. Still, I found beauty in it. Every green light felt like a small victory. The radio always talked about powerful people making empty promises, and all I cared about was being on time, doing my duty. My co-workers called me clockwork, half as a joke, but I kind of liked it. Being reliable in a world full of delays was my quiet badge of honor. No applause, no spotlight, just respect, and that was enough. From my driver's seat, I saw everything: laughter, arguments, apologies, silent tears. That small space on wheels held more human stories than any book could. I never judged anyone. Life had taught me everyone carries something the clock can't measure. Maybe that's why I was always kind, even when people ignored me. You never know the weight someone's carrying. The job was tiring, sure, but it was honest, and that gave me a peace no paycheck could buy. There were days when my body begged for rest. My back hurt, my eyes burned, but stopping wasn't an option. My boss never noticed my effort, but I didn't do it for praise. I did what was right because it was right. Simple as that. When older passengers struggled to climb aboard, I slowed down, waited. No one told me to do it, but respect doesn't need orders. Sometimes they'd thank me with a shy smile, and that made my day. It might seem small to some, but to me it was everything. If someone had told me that would be the last day of my routine, I'd have laughed. Everything felt normal, predictable. I woke up, got ready, kissed my wife's forehead, and left. The sky was grey, but nothing seemed unusual. Still, fate had already mapped out a route I could never imagine. I just wanted to be on time, as always. Just wanted to do my job. Little did I know that the delay that would cost me my job would also make me a hero. That day started like any other, but something in the air felt off, a quiet premonition I couldn't name. I left home a few minutes later than usual, nothing major. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that warns of rain and delays. I climbed into the bus, adjusted the mirrors, started the engine. The radio crackled with traffic reports, and I sighed, thinking, it's going to be a long day. I didn't know how right I was. The clock seemed to mock me with every red light. Still, I kept my cool. I'd handled worse days before, or so I thought. Traffic was unbearable. Cars frozen in place, horns blaring, tempers rising, the whole city choking on its own rush. My hands clenched the wheel, trying not to let frustration win. I knew being late would cost me, especially with a boss who mistook cruelty for discipline. I plotted every shortcut in my head, desperate to save minutes, but fate had already chosen its detour. Up ahead, I saw a car stopped, doors open, a woman waving her arms in panic. I hit the brakes, could have ignored it like most people did, but something inside me wouldn't let me. I jumped out, ran toward her. In the back seat, a little girl, unconscious, pale. The mother's screams cut through the noise. Nobody else stopped. Everyone drove past, eyes forward, pretending not to see. "She's not breathing," she cried. My heart pounded. I remembered a first aid course I took years ago, almost by accident. I loosened the seatbelt, checked for breathing. Weak, but there. Called an ambulance, tried to keep calm. Time lost all meaning. The mother trembled, whispering prayers. Sirens finally approached and paramedics took over. Before they left, she grabbed my hand. "If you hadn't stopped," her voice broke. I just nodded. Back in the bus, my hand still shook. 40 minutes late. I knew it was bad, but how could I regret saving a life? When I finally reached the garage, my boss was waiting, arms crossed, expression carved from ice. "You know what time you were supposed to be here?" he asked. I opened my mouth to explain, but he cut me off. "Excuses don't run a company, discipline does." I stood there, speechless. Sometimes the truth doesn't fit the moment, so I said nothing. That night, driving home, the city looked colder. No applause, no understanding, just silence. I thought about how cruel life can be to those who do the right thing unseen. Still, as the clouds broke and a faint light touched the horizon, I whispered to myself, "If I have to pay for doing what's right, so be it." I had no idea that soon the world would call that delay heroic. I've never been the kind of man who talks about his good deeds. People who brag about doing the right thing usually don't understand what it means to have character. So that day, I didn't tell anyone, not even my wife. When I got home, tired, eyes haunted by the image of that unconscious little girl, she just asked if my day had been rough. I said yes, but that tomorrow would be better, easier that way. She didn't need to know I'd watched life hang by a thread, or that my job was already gone because of it. Sometimes silence is the price of peace. The following days felt heavier. I tried to carry on, to act normal, but the echo of that word, unjustified delay, rang in my head. No mention of effort, no note of the years I showed up early or never called in sick, just a stamp and a signature. I thought about telling my side, maybe asking for a second chance. But what was the point? That company didn't deserve my truth. I knew what I had done, and maybe that was enough. This world has a twisted way of rewarding appearances and punishing integrity. Still, at night, when the noise of the city faded, that scene replayed like a movie stuck on loop. The mother's trembling hands, the girl's shallow breath, the sirens coming closer. My chest tightened again, not from regret, but from helplessness. I'd saved a life and lost my livelihood, and no one knew. I started to wonder if being good still mattered in a world that only counts time and money. Rumors spread fast. Some co-workers whispered that I'd probably overslept. Others said I'd argued with the boss. I heard it all and stayed quiet. Each lie stung a little, but defending myself would only sound like begging for sympathy. Let them talk. I knew the truth, and that was enough to hold my head up. Even if the world called me careless, I could sleep with a clean conscience. But a clean conscience doesn't pay bills, rent, groceries, overdue payments. They don't care about morality. My wife tried to sound calm, saying it would all work out. I pretended to believe her. But inside, a quiet fear grew. Not of staying unemployed, but of being forgotten, of doing the right thing and watching it disappear into silence. What I did not know was that silence has a way of breaking, and the truth I'd buried was about to find its voice. The day I got fired is burned into my memory like a scar. The garage floor was still damp from last night's rain, smelling of oil and smoke. I walked into my boss's office with my head high, but my heart at war. He didn't even offer me a seat. His desk, covered in papers, looked like an altar to indifference. "You were 40 minutes late," he said flatly. "That's unacceptable." I opened my mouth to explain, but he cut me off sharp as a blade. "No excuses. I've made my decision." It wasn't just losing the job that hurt, it was how easily years of loyalty turned into nothing. Collect your belongings. The company can't depend on people who can't keep time. And that was it. No questions, no truth, just silence. I left the office empty-handed but heavy-hearted. Every step echoed with the reminder that life isn't fair. My co-workers stared, whispered, pretended not to see. Fear keeps people quiet. I grabbed my jacket and the old ID badge I'd worn with pride, tucking it away like a souvenir from something that used to matter. As I walked out, the image of that little girl flashed before me. Her still body, the sound of sirens, her mother's cries. And I thought, maybe my mistake wasn't being late. Maybe it was stopping. At home, my wife understood without a word. She sat beside me, took my hand, and we stayed there, silent, breathing the same pain. I tried to smile, but it wouldn't come. My voice cracked when I said, "It's over." She answered, "Then start again." Simple words, but they kept me standing. Sometimes love is the only thing that holds you together when everything else falls apart. The following days were the hardest. Shame weighed more than hunger. I avoided old co-workers, took detours to dodge familiar faces. Bills piled up. The world kept moving, indifferent. My firing had a noble cause, but no one could see it. The system punished empathy like a flaw. I kept asking myself if doing good still mattered. Each time the doubt returned, I remembered the girl breathing again, and I knew, yes, it does, even when it costs everything. One afternoon, I passed by the garage again. My old bus stood there, another driver behind the wheel, same uniform, same route. For a second, I felt replaceable, but then I realized he might drive my bus, but not my story. That moment between life and death belonged to me. The punishment took my job, but not my humanity, and in a strange way that felt like justice. Losing my job was one thing, losing my ground, that came later. The days dragged like they wanted to punish me too. I still woke up early, out of habit, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the uniform hanging on the chair. Clean, pressed, useless. My kids asked when I'd be driving again, and I told them soon, forcing a smile that never reached my eyes. Daddy's just resting a little. Lies meant to protect them, but each word tasted bitter. The weight inside me grew. The kind of weight that comes from doing what is right and paying for it anyway. Injustice doesn't just hurt, it corrodes your certainty. I started questioning myself. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have just kept driving. The questions echoed at night when sleep refused to come. The mind tries to make sense of cruelty, and deep down I knew. I did what any decent person should have done, but knowing didn't make it easier. Shame mixed with anger at being disposable, shame at caring too much about those who never cared for me. Every time I saw a bus go by, it felt like a small cut, not just because I'd lost my job, but because I'd lost a part of who I was. My wife stayed strong, even when I saw the fear in her eyes. She didn't complain, but I noticed the way she stretched the groceries to last, counted coins quietly at the table. Her quiet strength humbled me. I felt like I'd failed her. The man who once brought stability now just sat at home, pretending everything was fine. "Still," she'd say, "you did the right thing. One day it'll come back to you." I wanted to believe that, but belief is heavy when the bills keep coming. The money ran out fast. I cut small luxuries. No more morning coffee, no newspaper, no small gifts for the kids. Each cut felt like a piece of dignity slipping away. I remember selling my old watch, the one I wore to make sure I was never late. Bitter irony. The man at the pawn shop said, "Nice piece. Shame it won't fetch much." I smiled, but inside something cracked. That watch used to measure my time. Now time was measuring me, by delays, by losses, by silence. Still, something inside refused to die. A quiet voice kept saying, "This isn't the end." Maybe life was keeping score in ways I couldn't see. Maybe justice was just slow. I didn't know when or how, but I knew that what I did, stopping to help that child, couldn't stay buried forever. Some truths, no matter how long they sleep, wake up on their own. It all started with a notification ping, a message from an old co-worker. "Man, have you seen this?" Followed by a link. I almost ignored it. I was tired of bad news, but curiosity won. I tapped the video and my heart stopped for a moment. It was the recording from that day. Someone had filmed everything. Me running from the bus, rushing toward the car, helping the mother, lifting the unconscious girl. Every detail, every second caught on camera. I sat frozen. For the first time, the world could see what I had lived through alone. The comments were flooding in. "This man's a hero. They fired him for saving a child. Where's the justice?" The video spread like wildfire. Within hours, TV stations picked it up. Suddenly, I wasn't the fired driver anymore. I was the man who saved a life and lost his job for it. My story traveled faster than I ever could. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, strangers, even politicians wanting to be seen with me. I just stared at the screen, stunned, watching my quiet act of decency turn into a headline. But what hit me hardest wasn't the attention, it was the message from the girl's mother. She found me online and wrote, "She's okay, alive because of you." I read it again and again, unable to reply. Her words carried something real, not praise, but gratitude. And that's when I understood. What I did that morning wasn't just bravery. It was a reminder of something people forget. Kindness still exists. Maybe that's why it struck such a nerve. Deep down, everyone wants to believe good still wins. Then came the interviews, the recognition, the praise. People who once ignored me now called me an inspiration. Funny how truth, once exposed, changes everyone's tone. Some old co-workers texted awkward apologies. Others dropped clapping emojis, like that made up for their silence. I didn't hold grudges. Courage is easy when the crowd's already cheering. But still, seeing truth rise felt good. Eventually, the news reached my former boss, and the silence shattered. He tried to explain, said he didn't know all the details, that the firing was a misunderstanding. Too late. The video told the story better than I ever could. The internet has its flaws, but it doesn't forget. For once, power was on my side. I didn't need revenge. Life took care of it. Justice came not in noise or anger, but through light. The glow of a phone screen revealing what had always been true. Suddenly, the silence turned into a storm. Social media exploded. The crowd had picked its hero and its villain. For once, I wasn't the one being crushed. Thousands of comments, shares, hashtags. Should justice for the driver. Highway hero. Strangers defended me, like they'd known me forever. It felt surreal. I'd spent my life invisible, and now the whole country knew my name. News anchors said it with solemn faces. Journalists repeated my words as headlines. He was fired for being late because he was saving a life. The reaction was overwhelming. TV segments showed the firing letter next to the video of the rescue. The contrast hit hard, a cold piece of paper stamped "unjustified delay" beside footage of a man pulling a child from a car. People were furious. Some called for boycotts, others started donation campaigns. I got messages from everywhere, drivers, nurses, mothers, all saying the same thing. "You reminded us that good people still exist." That line hurt in the best and worst way. It said more about the world than about me. Soon, my story became a symbol. Morning shows invited me to speak live. Bright lights, microphones, endless questions, things that would have scared me before. But I answered with calm. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. "I don't hold grudges," I said. "I just hope no one else loses their job for doing what's right." Each time I spoke, I felt lighter, like I was giving people something they'd lost faith in: decency. The story had stopped being mine. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been punished for doing the right thing. At home, my wife cried watching me on TV. "I've never been so proud," she said. My kids, too young to understand, told their friends their dad was a hero. I smiled awkwardly, but something inside me healed. Dignity, that quiet, stubborn thing, had found its way back. Shame had turned into respect, pain into purpose. It felt as if life itself was whispering, "I saw what you did. I didn't forget." But alongside the praise came public outrage at my old boss. People demanded answers. They wanted accountability. The company lost clients, faced boycotts, became a target of scorn. I watched it unfold with mixed feelings, not revenge, but relief. I didn't want anyone destroyed. I just wanted to be seen. And now, the whole world was watching. The truth, once buried, had learned how to shout. It didn't take long for the tide to turn. My former boss's name started circulating alongside the video. At first, it was just whispers in the comments, then headlines. The man who once loved being in control had become the face of coldness. Reporters went to the garage, shoving microphones in his face. He dodged the questions, voice trembling, saying it was a misunderstanding. But no one believed him. People wanted what he'd never given me, an honest explanation. And when he couldn't give it, the outrage grew. The internet, once my judge, had turned its gaze on him. The company scrambled to contain the damage. They released a statement saying they deeply regretted the incident and would review internal protocols. Pretty words, empty of truth. But it was too late. The story had a life of its own. Former employees came forward, telling stories everyone already knew but never dared to say. He treated people like machines. To him, empathy was weakness, humanity an inconvenience. Each testimony cracked the mask a little more, and for the first time, fear switched sides. A few days later, he was dismissed. The company was collapsing under public pressure. I read the headline on some news site, "Manager fired after firing hero driver." That word, hero, still felt foreign to me. But his photo said it all. The same man who once fired me without a thought now looked hollow, beaten by his own pride. And surprisingly, I didn't feel joy, just relief. A clean, quiet relief. Life had done the heavy lifting for me. People expected me to celebrate, to lash out. But revenge, I learned, isn't loud. True revenge is when justice arrives without you having to move a finger. The man who once looked down on me now knew how it felt to be discarded. And me, I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is the sharpest answer there is. Weeks later, I got a letter, not from the company, from him. He wrote that he hadn't slept since that day, that he replayed it over and over. He apologized, said he wished he could undo it. I read it slowly, felt pity, not anger, folded it and tucked it away. No reply, not because of pride, but because forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes it lives quietly, in the space where pain finally stops asking for justice. After the storm came calm, not the empty kind that forgets, but the quiet that follows survival. People still called me a hero, though I never felt like one. To me, a hero is just someone who keeps doing what's right when no one's watching. Still, life started shifting. I was invited to speak at a charity event. At first, my hands shook. Words got stuck in my throat. But when I saw the crowd, faces moved, eyes shining, I realized my story wasn't just mine. It belonged to anyone who's ever been punished for doing good. When the applause came, I didn't feel pride. I felt peace. Soon, new opportunities found me. A transport company reached out, saying they needed drivers with human values. I laughed at that. Before, no one hired character, only punctuality. I agreed, but with one condition, that every driver would receive first aid training. I wanted what I'd lived to mean something. They accepted. And now, every new driver learns what once cost me my job, that saving a life is never being late. Getting behind the wheel again felt strange at first, but lighter somehow. I wasn't just driving anymore. I was moving forward with purpose. Then came a tribute. The city council honored me with a plaque that read, "For courage and humanity." They said my story inspired internal reforms, even talks of a new civic recognition law. And I stood there holding that plaque, thinking it all began with being late. Funny how what looks like a mistake can become the turning point of a life. My wife and kids were in the audience, clapping, smiling. I hadn't just regained public respect, I'd regained my own. Sometimes people still stop me on the street. "You're the driver, right? The one who saved the girl?" I smile awkwardly. "Yes," I say, then add, "I just did what anyone should." They always reply, "That's courage." Maybe it is, or maybe it's just humanity, a quiet thing the world keeps forgetting, but that refuses to die. My story keeps traveling, reminding people that decency, even in silence, endures. At work now, people treat me with respect. Not fear, not pity, but empathy. I've learned that dignity isn't earned through applause, but through peace of mind. Each time I sit behind the wheel, close the door and start the engine, I feel that same flutter in my chest. Only now, it's gratitude. Life broke me, yes, but it broke me open, not apart. And maybe that's the real victory, to rise again, not untouched, but more human than ever. Looking back now, I realize that delay was the most punctual moment of my life. Everything I lost, the job, the routine, the certainty, led me somewhere better. I learned that time isn't measured in minutes, but in choices. Sometimes a single act of courage counts more than a lifetime of obedience. The world moves too fast, and we mistake speed for purpose. I used to be like that, racing to never be late until the day I stopped. Funny, isn't it? The mistake that ruined me became the moment that set me free. Life has its own justice, slow but precise. It doesn't always come with applause, but it comes. My boss's downfall, the public support, the recognition, none of that was my doing. It happened because truth, sooner or later, always surfaces. If you do what's right and no one notices, don't worry. The universe keeps receipts. It pays back in strange currencies, sometimes a lesson, sometimes forgiveness, sometimes peace. These days, I still drive, but the road feels different. Every passenger who steps onto my bus carries a story I'll never fully know, and that's fine. I've learned to respect what can't be seen, the quiet struggles, the invisible goodness. And when traffic stops and people complain, I just smile and think, not every delay is carelessness. Sometimes it's courage in disguise. Because being in the right place doesn't always mean being on time. If you've made it this far, maybe this story belongs to you too. Maybe you've been wronged, overlooked or punished for doing the right thing. So remember this, truth has a strange patience. It waits, but it never forgets. And when it finally shows up, it brings light. And before you scroll away, if this story touched you, if it reminded you that doing right still matters, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my shoes. Because in the end, what we share here isn't just stories. It is proof that hope still drives the world forward.